okay not to be a not-so-good cook, but if you're a bad cook, whatever you do, don't sign up for that. Let's pray. Dear God, I pray as we get ready to move from all of the cool announcements and listening to Earl talk that you would help us to move into your word. I pray that people would be able to see past me and see you, and I am so grateful that you're a good, good Father. In Jesus' precious and holy name, amen. When I was growing up, I loved my dad, and I wanted to do anything I could to spend time with him. But my dad was impossible to please. Sometimes he could be harsh and distant and cruel and even mean. I remember one particular day when I was 12 years old, I asked my dad if I could go to work with him. And my dad reluctantly agreed, and he had a normal job that he worked all week long, and then on the weekends he would paint inside of people's houses, and sometimes he would even do wallpaper. So I asked my dad if I could come to work for him, and that day, I have to admit, it wasn't a good day for me. What I did was I got there, and about the first half an hour, he was frantically working, trying to get this job done as quick as he could, because I knew he had other jobs he had to go to. So I went up to him and I said, "Is there anything I can do to help you?" And he asked me a question. He said, "Do you know how to clean a paintbrush?" And I said, "Of course I do, Dad." So I took the paintbrush and I went to the side of the house and I turned on the faucet and I sat there. And before I left, he said, "Make sure you get this brush clean." So here I am trying desperately to get this brush clean. And I'm working on it. I got the water running for at least a half an hour. And by the time I was done, that brush was absolutely clean. When my dad came to check on it, unfortunately, I had got paint all over the side of the house. Not only did I get paint on the side of the house, but there was paint going all the way down the dirt, into the driveway, and down the street. My dad came up, and you could just tell there was a look of disgust on his face. He didn't say much, but he did say to me, "What I want you to do now is I want you to go and sit in the backyard and wait until I'm done cleaning up your mess." I kind of could see my dad, and it took him a little bit over an hour to clean up my mess, and he was mad. He walked right past me into the house so that he could finish up the job. I waited about 10 minutes so he could calm down just a little bit, and then I walked in, and I asked him, I said, "Is there anything I can do to help you?" And he said, "You could go throughout the house and pick up all of the drop cloths and then take them out to the car because we were just about to be finished." So I made sure I got all the drop cloths. I wanted to make sure my dad was happy with me, so I got every single one, and I wanted to carry him out in one trip so he could know that I was useful and helpful. So I picked up all these drop cloths, and I had more than I should have been carrying, and it went to where it obstructed my vision just a little bit. I walked outside the house onto this guy's brand new deck, and I didn't notice that there was a can of oil-based paint. I kicked over the paint onto the deck, and it spilled all over the place. And this was the kind of deck that there's no possible way you could get underneath it, so there's no way you could clean up the mess. What ensued after that was something that, for most part, I've forgotten. My dad erupted in anger and frustration and unleashed on me for at least 10 minutes, and what came out of his mouth was just unbelievably painful. But the words that he said as he ended has stuck with me for 44 years. He said, "You are absolutely useless, and I'm never bringing you on a job with me again." Those words sat with me, and those words were painful on my soul, and I desperately wanted to be a good dad. I wanted to be different than my dad, and we started having kids, and we had 2 kids, and one day, when my son was 7, he wanted to go swimming at Lifetime Fitness. So I took him swimming, and I wanted to be a better dad than my dad. So we were in the pool, and he said, "Hey, Dad, is there any way we could go out in the truck and get the torpedo that we just got so that we can play inside the pool?" And it was 10 degrees below zero outside. We'd already started swimming. I decided, okay, Zach, we'll go outside and we'll get that. We got our clothes on, kind of dried our hair, went out to the truck, and I was trying to empower my son. So I handed him the keys to the truck, and then we opened up the back. He crawled in and got the torpedo, which was cool, although he lost the keys to the truck. And if anyone's ever been in any one of my vehicles, you know it's an absolute catastrophic mess. There's all kinds of chaos in there. And This was back in the days before you had like smartphones where you could pull out your phone and you could see easily everything in front of you. We were crawling out there, and I was looking and looking and looking, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't find the keys, and I got more and more frustrated. And then, as I finally got to the place I couldn't handle it anymore, I started yelling at my son, and I started saying some harsh words, and then I looked in his eyes. And I got to see his face, and something inside of me paid attention to what was happening, and I stopped yelling. And I wanted to be a good dad, but I didn't know how. About 2.5 months later, my son was really into wrestling, and there was this really cool wrestling tournament in Wisconsin. I know that's hard to believe it was in Wisconsin, but we went there. My wife was on a women's retreat, so I took both of the kids. My son was probably around 7. My daughter was 3.5, and we were driving up there to the wrestling tournament, and he had to weigh in at 6:30 in the morning, so we wanted to stay in the hotel so we could be up and refreshed in the morning. My daughter fell asleep on the way to the tournament, so we got to the hotel. She's asleep, and I decided that I wanted her to be able to stay sleeping. It's one of those hotels where you could pull right in front, and you could see the front desk. And so what I decided to do was to leave the car running, and I said to my son, I said, hey, I want to make sure that you keep Grace safe, so stay in the car. Got out of the car, walked into the hotel, to the counter, and started paying to check in. And about 1.5 minutes later, my son comes walking in to the hotel. He's got a smile on his face, and I said, what are you doing? He looked at me, and he said, Dad, it's okay. Grace is completely safe. I locked the car door. 45 minutes later, we got the car opened. And I was able to survive that experience. I was just as frustrated as I was before, but I didn't allow anything harsh to come out of my mouth, and I didn't say anything that I would regret. And something inside of me started to get hope that possibly I could be different than my dad. I desperately wanted to be a good dad. Have you ever thought about what a good dad is? Have you ever thought about what is it like to be a good dad? As I was preparing, because I knew for the last 3 weeks I was going to get to speak to fathers on Father's Day, and I've been processing, what does it look like to be a successful father? And as I was processing, I came across a question that just made me stop and think. And here's the question that I asked myself. What do you want your children to say about you? And I want you dads to be honest and ask that question. What do you want your kids to say about you? And this is what I came up with. I'm not saying that I am this. And I'm not saying that I'm ever going to get to hear these words, but these are the words I would love to hear if I got my kids to say what I wanted. Here's what I would want my kids to say. My dad can be trusted. I can count on him no matter what. My dad is trustworthy, and he is a sense of strength and stability. I want to hear, my dad loves me. He's passionate about me, and he's genuinely interested in my thoughts, my feelings, and my concern, and he is willing to listen to me even if I have something to say that he doesn't want to hear. I want to hear, my dad believes in me and encourages me to accomplish my dreams. He is fundamentally convinced at the core of his being that I am amazing, and he is willing to do whatever it takes to help me accomplish my dreams, even if that means challenging me or encouraging me. I want to hear my dad say, I'm wise. Some days, I have to be honest, I settle for, I'm not an idiot. My dad has my best interest at heart, and he knows how life works, and he's willing to be able to speak into my word, into my particular life with clarity and wisdom. I want to hear, my dad wants to be with me. I know he's available. I know he's present. I know that I have access to him in ways that nobody else does. Guys, would you do me a favor and just wrestle with this? What do you want your children to say about you? The more I thought about this question and the more I reflected upon it, I came across this, is I think that what us as dads really want is the respect of our grown children. I know that's what I want. I want my kids to want to spend time with me even if they don't have to. I want my kids, when they're grown and they're out of the house, to respect me and to believe that I am a good dad. Is it possible? Turn with me, if you will, in your Bibles to 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, and we're going to look at a passage. And interestingly enough, this passage was not written to dads, and it wasn't designed to help dads become better fathers. What Paul did is he talked about his own philosophy of ministry, and he talked about how he dealt with other people, and he used fathers as an example. He took a second, pulled aside what good fathers did, and used that as an example of how he treated everyone. I'm going to be speaking primarily to dads today. But I believe that what I have to say will apply to every single woman in this room, and it'll apply to people, even if you're teenagers, or if you're a single mom, or if you're a 60-year-old man and you don't even have a child. Because the principles that Paul taught here can be applied to every area of your life, and even if you apply just one of them, it will make a significant difference. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, Paul is talking about his own philosophy of ministry and how he deals and responds with actual people. Here's what he said. Surely you remember, brothers and sisters, our toil and hardship. We work night and day in order not to be a burden to anyone while we preach the gospel to you. He's saying in the underpinning of the philosophy of how I do ministry, I am aware of how it affects other people, and what I do has in mind how it will impact other people. You are witnesses, and so is God, of how holy, righteous, and blameless we were among you. He is willing to put the emphasis not on the people he's working with, but his own internal character. And Paul is able to say, I was focused on becoming, not just telling you what to do. For you know that we dealt with each other as a father deals with his own children. And this is what I think is worthwhile for all of us. Here's what good fathers do. Encouraging, comforting, and urging you to live lives worthy of God who calls you into his kingdom and glory. If you're a good dad, then there's 3 things that you do. And this is how you get the respect of your grown children. It's through encouragement, comfort, and support. I want to take a second and kind of help lay exactly what that looks like. Encouragement is just giving hope. It's just coming alongside of somebody and making it so that they're more encouraged when you left than you were when you started. It can be where you acknowledge their compliments, or it can be a simple positive outlook, or it can be about a solution-oriented approach. It can also be about helping them manage what happens when they have setbacks, or teaching them how to overcome their own failure. All of those things encourage people. The second one is something that you wouldn't expect him to say to dads. You would expect him to say this to moms. And I think it applies to moms, but moms naturally are a little bit better at this. So what I want to do is kind of give you an example. That whenever you comfort someone, what that literally means is you have to be willing to sit in their experience just for a second. When you comfort someone, you acknowledge that they're sad. You acknowledge that they're frustrated. You validate their feelings, and you allow them to be where they are. And you have to first have empathy and then work your way towards understanding so that you can offer emotional support. There's something powerful that takes place when you are sitting with a person long enough for them to feel like this person gets me and understand where I'm coming from. Oftentimes as dads, our focus is about telling. It's about fixing. It's about solving. And I just want to speak to the hearts of some dads. If you try to fix your kids or solve their problems before they feel like you've heard them, they will resist you every single step of the way. The last one I want to talk about, and then I'm going to help you to be able to live it, is an empowering belief. When we hear the word urging, what we think of is this little league coach who's on the sidelines, then he's yelling at the kids, trying to get them to accomplish something by winning the game. The coach most often has really good motives, but the strategy is by putting pressure externally so that they can perform and become something. Now, often as dads, we have good motives and we want our kids to exceed our expectations and we want them to succeed. But the path that we choose to use it often puts more pressure on them and freezes them up so they cannot accomplish what they really want. And it's not about the intensity and forcing them to be what they never thought they could be. It's more of a quiet, internal, passionate belief that my kid has what it takes. Chap Clark is one of my professors in seminary, and he was able to take this passage and put it in a way that just made sense in my mind. Here's what he said. The kind of urging that God has in mind is the regular and consistent message that empowers your children to keep moving against all odds. It's the urging that releases them from the pressure to perform so they can freely live a life of faith from the inside out. Our children need a dad that believes in them and is fundamentally convinced at the core of his being that they have what it takes to accomplish the calling that God has placed on their lives. Something that was super helpful to me is I desperately want to be a good dad. And I knew when my kid was young that there were things that I was doing that had nothing to do with being a good dad. So I was available and open to learning everything I could. And I came across something, and it gave me a practical tool so that I could be able to help my kids along the way. And here's the principle. You have to parent different according to the age of your kids. You cannot parent a 2-year-old the same way you do a 25-year-old. And there's certain steps you need to take all along the way. And if you do not change, you will cause all kinds of pain and you will never accomplish what you hopefully, ideally want to. So what I'm going to do is take some time and walk you through this. If you're worried about getting notes and trying to catch this, you can go to the back and pick up an orange sheet. It'll help you to be able to apply this to your own parenting later on down the road. But in phase 1, and it's different for every kid, some kids last a little bit longer. Some of your kids are probably like super good, so they're a little bit ahead and they're advanced in the scale, so you might have to change things a little bit according to your own kid. But at first, you have to be an affectionate dictator, and what that means is you have to communicate that you love them and you have to be in charge. You have complete control over their friends and activities. Your child needs you to discipline and protect them. You have to make sure that they stay alive. That's what you do when you have a baby. But you also want to make sure that you're the one giving them guidance and direction, and you have to discipline them, because if you don't teach them that you're in charge and you don't force them to change their behavior, by the time they get to be adults, it could get really crazy and ugly. And some parents are terrified of their kids, and what they're afraid of is that their kids will not like them. It's better to have your kids a little upset with you when they're young than to wait until you experience what happens way down the road. You have to demonstrate love by meeting their basic needs and showering them with affection and approval. And it is crucial that you do both. The one thing I want to make sure that we all catch is that at the end goal of parenting is to have independent children that can make wise decisions without you. And you have to parent all along the way in order to accomplish that goal. The second phase is ages 6 to 12, and since some of your kids are advanced, it might even be 5 for them. You have to be an encouraging instructor, and what that means is you have a lot of control of their friends and activities. Your child needs to have instruction and guidance. Now, I want to speak to some hearts of some dads, okay? What we ultimately want is we want our children to respect us when they get adults. And there's 2 strategies you can take. One strategy is to demand that they respect you. And the other strategy is that you can become respectable. Which one do you want to do? Because if you choose the path to demand that they respect you, and you don't take time to pour into them and encourage them, and you don't listen to what they're going through, and you're not aware of what it is that they're feeling, and you don't communicate that they believe in you, they may give you compliance, but they won't give you obedience. You see, my dad was a dictator, and I did what he wanted, but he never got my heart. You have to demonstrate love by knowing your child. And I want to speak to dads just for a second. If you have a girl, you have got to know her. If you give a girl instruction without first understanding her heart and what's going on inside of her emotions, the only conclusion that she's going to come to is you are an idiot. Along this phase, you want to learn how to answer their deepest questions. If they're a boy, they're asking the question, do I have what it takes? And you have to let them know you believe in them. If they're a girl, they're asking the question, am I lovable? And either way, what you want to communicate to your children is, I am enough. As they get older, this is really super hard, is you've got to release control. And some of you parents are unwilling to do this. You have limited control over your friends and activities. Did you know when your kid becomes a teenager, you can't control everything they do? Especially when they get a car. Your child needs increased freedom and opportunities to be responsible. I would encourage you to twin responsibility and freedom, because what you want is them to be responsible, and what they want is freedom. And there is this massive clash, and unless you teach them that the more responsibility that they give you, the more freedom they get, it will be a constant battle. It is a healthy thing for kids to become independent. Instead of fighting it every step of the way, leverage it so that you can empower them to make wise choices while they're still in your house. Demonstrate love by listening to them and understanding their perspective. Dads, if you have teenagers, and you aren't willing to comfort them, and you're not willing to validate their emotions, it gets ugly. Phase 4, and this is the most difficult and the one that brings the greatest sense of joy, is you have to become an available consultant. There's nothing more painful than a parent than to drop their students off for college in their freshman dorm. You will experience emotions that you did not know you have. When you drop your kid off and you drive away and you know that they're there and you have no ability to change or control any of those decisions, it's the most stressful moment in all of life. But it's also delightful, because then you get to have a friend for life. Did you know that you're going to spend more time with your kids being their friends than you are being their instructors? And if you don't see that goal in mind, you will miss out on the greatest joy of being a parent. You have no control over their friends and activities. Your adult need your encouragement, support, and advice. But the caveat is that you have to not give them unsolicited advice. The cool thing about somebody who's a consultant is you only listen to them if two things are there. One, you have to believe that they have your best interest at heart, and two, that you know what you're talking about. And if you don't take time from their little to convince them that you love them and you care about them and you're willing to listen to them and their concerns matter and that you are going to be there if they're in pain or not, then when they get to be an adult, they're not going to listen to anything you say. Demonstrate your love by being available and recognizing their independence. Dad, I don't want to put any guilt on you, and my goal isn't to make you feel bad. What I want to do is I want to say, you guys can do it. You have a wonderful opportunity to pour into your kids. And you may not realize it, dads, but your words carry incredible weight with your kids. Some of your kids are sitting underneath the weight of your disapproval. And I want to encourage you that you can become a better dad even from this point forward. Some of you might have to listen to the sermon and say, you know what I've done and what I've said wasn't healthy, and I need to go back and undo those words and communicate that I do care and I do believe, and I'm willing to listen to you. I don't want you to leave out of here thinking, man, that guy really hammered me. What I want you to leave here is thinking, I can learn 3 things, and if I apply even one of them, it will make my relationship better. How do you earn the respect of your adult grown children? Encourage them. with your affection, attention, and approval. In Ephesians chapter 6, it says, fathers, don't exasperate your children. And when you exasperate somebody, as you frustrate them to no end. In Colossians 3, it says, fathers, don't embitter your kids. There's a couple ways that you can do that. Is unrealistic expectations. If your kids have to be the star of the football team or a Rhodes Scholar in order to get your approval, you will exasperate them. Withholding your affection, attention, or approval, enforcing the rules without a relationship, trying to get them to do something without understanding who they are and what's important to them will cause them great pain. Comparing your kids to one another. You don't ever want to say, can't you be like your sister? How do you earn the respect of your grown children? Comfort them with empathy, understanding, and emotional support. If I could leave you dads with one thing, learn empathy. And if you don't know it, you will never regret it. This is the final thing I'm going to end on, is how do you earn the respect of your grown kids? Empower them by becoming their biggest fan and strongest supporter. What I want to leave you with is I want you as a dad to empower your kids with one unbelievably cool thought. I believe you can do it. And I'm glad you're my son and daughter. I want you to talk to some courageous dads for just a second. If you have courage, ask your kids how you're doing on those three things. And more importantly, would you ask yourself? Because I believe that if you do even one of those, you will make a profound difference and that you will leave a legacy that you want to leave. Dear Heavenly Father, I know there's some people in here that they feel bad because they've unleashed some harsh words. And I want them to know that you extend grace and we can undo the hurt that we've caused. Give them the courage to take that route. God, I pray for dads that you would let them know how much you see in them. God, help us to become the kind of dads that our kids want to hang out with. God, I pray that this church would be known as a place where we are amazing dads. In Jesus' precious and holy name, amen.